This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the best all-in-one platform for all of your website building needs. Hey guys, it's Celestia, and I love character design. Making OCs was one of my primary motivations for getting into art in the first place, and it's a passion that stayed with me through all of the many years that followed. There's nothing more fun to me than telling a story through a character's appearance alone, so it's something I've devoted a lot of time to throughout my career. Over the past couple years, I've been able to share very little of that on the channel or on social media, because the characters I've been working on are for use in a project that won't be made public for at least a few more years, which has been a little frustrating. But however frustrating it's been not to be able to show you guys those designs, it's still been 10 times more rewarding to be able to develop them regardless, and I've learned so much in the process. We've talked about OCs a lot on this channel, and that's in large part because of how many artists share my origin story of having gotten into art primarily to make them, because they just love them that much. So to balance out my most recent video discussing why OCs get so much hate in online spaces, I figured I'd give them some love by sharing some of the things that I've learned in the process of studying and pursuing character design more seriously that have helped me immensely to design mine better, because maybe they'll help you too. So today I'll be sharing 10 character design tips to help you make better OCs. Hopefully, maybe. We'll see. First though, let me take a moment to thank the sponsor of today's video, Squarespace. Whether you're just designing OCs for yourself that you want to show off, or seriously pursuing character design and need a portfolio to showcase your work, Squarespace is the place to do it, because I personally think they're the best website building and hosting platform out there. There's a reason I've gushed about them so much for so long that comments regularly joke that we're married, and it's because I genuinely believe that they're an invaluable asset to any artist that wants to display their work in a way that really makes it shine. I've used them myself for years now, since long before working with them, both to make my previous super branded cutesy portfolio and my new revamped more professional version. Despite being completely different in almost every way, both were just as easy to make using the templates and tools that Squarespace provided, and the process both times was so stress-free and straightforward that it was genuinely fun. And while their portfolio options are like god tier, the same goes for pretty much any type of site that you could possibly want to build. They have a massive library of templates with tons of categories tailored to suit pretty much any purpose. And even better, whichever one you choose can be just as easily upgraded into a fully functional online store, because they offer all of the tools that you need to turn it into one. The ability to manage payments and inventory, handle shipping and fulfillment, and even boost your SEO to help you get more eyes on your site and maximize the number of customers shopping there. It's perfect for selling paintings, merch, prints, and really any kind of physical goods. But selling services like consultations, event management, editing, and even art commissions is just as easy with everything Squarespace has to offer. A streamlined workflow, built-in appointment scheduling, email marketing tools, and so much more. And your customers have just as many options as you do too, because they offer all of the most popular payment methods like Klarna, ACH Direct Debit, Apple Pay, Afterpay, and ClearPay, and even allow you the option to send individualized branded invoices to specific clients, so you can accept orders from all around the world with just a few clicks. So whether you're an artist in need of a portfolio, an entrepreneur building an online store, a creator setting up an interactive blog, or a small business owner making a landing page, Squarespace is the place to do it. And you can find out yourself by going to squarespace.com to get your own free trial today. And once you've built the perfect site that you're ready to launch, you can get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain by going to squarespace.com/DuchessCelestia, linked in the description. Thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video, and please go check them out. Now, let's get into the tips. Let's start at the very beginning of the design process with the first one, inspiration. In my opinion, the process of collecting, compiling, and analyzing your inspirations for your character is one of the most important parts of designing them, because it pretty much informs all of the other ones. So take your time with it. Don't rush it. Give it the attention and care it deserves. And most importantly, be mindful about how you approach it. It's easy to get overwhelmed by inspiration, especially when you're looking for it on a massive image board like Pinterest or something, where there's so much available that it's hard to even know where to start. It's also easy to look at those inspirations and get caught up in their visual appeal alone. I've looked at tons of character designs and thought, oh my god, that looks so good, I want to incorporate something like that, purely because it was just so pretty, even though realistically it wouldn't have worked or made sense with the character I was designing. Compiling inspiration for a character isn't just compiling design ideas that look nice. Obviously they should look nice, yes, but the main priority should be finding inspiration that suits the character's purpose, identity, and setting. When looking for other character designs to inspire your own, specifically seek out characters that are similar to yours in at least one significant way. Look for characters with similar personalities, characters with the same profession, characters in similar settings or worlds. It'll make it easier to focus on the elements that you can actually use for your character as an individual, because of who they are, not just any character because they're aesthetically pleasing. Pick crews and dress-up games like Love Nikki or Fashion Dreamer are also a really helpful tool during the inspiration gathering gathering process, because they allow you to experiment with different looks and combinations of design elements without needing to commit to or draw any of them yourself. They might even offer pieces of clothing that you weren't familiar with and therefore didn't consider, at which point you can combine them with the other pieces you plan to use and see if they work well together. The freedom of experimentation these games offer, especially with a large library of visual assets available, is immensely valuable at this point because you can quickly and easily use them to come up with a bunch of different jumping off points for a design, and visualize how the combinations of design elements you're envisioning in your head would actually look. The next tip is a simple but important one to think about before moving further and actually using those inspirations to start designing. Consider what your OC is actually going to be used for. If you're just designing them for fun and for use in your personal illustrations, or if you're designing them for a piece of writing, or even to some extent a video game in which they'll be 3D modeled and won't need to be drawn or redrawn once that model has been made. In those cases, you have a lot more freedom to add quite a bit of detail to their design. But if you're going to be using them in something like a comic or an animation that will require you to draw them over and over and over again, including that much detail is going to make you hate your life very, very quickly. It's better to plan around that before you start designing than to figure out later that you went too hard with the details and now the character is unbearable to animate or depict in comic form. The third tip is another one best suited for the early stages of character design, and it's to focus on shape language first before adding any other elements and developing the character further. It's an incredibly underrated aspect of character design because people underestimate how significant and impactful of a role it plays. We associate shapes with traits. Round, circular forms give off vibes of friendliness and softness, and they feel non-threatening and comforting. Square-like forms, conversely, project more authority, more strength and sturdiness. They may even come across as intimidating and feel significantly more unyielding, rigid, and immalleable. Triangular shapes are edgier, literally, sharp, dramatic, maybe even threatening or dangerous. Building your character with shapes that reflect the traits they possess does wonders when it comes to showing their personality through their form alone, and I personally think it's very important to establish that first before adding any more detail. Tip 4 relates to this, and it's to make sure your character has a distinct, recognizable, memorable silhouette. This is something that any channel or artist discussing character design will tell you. The best, most iconic characters you can think of, you would recognize based on the outline of their form alone. You need to make sure that if you filled in the entirety of your character's outline and obscured every detail, you would still see that silhouette and immediately recognize them. People will appreciate the detail in your character design once they observe and examine it closely, but they'll remember your character based on that silhouette and the shapes that make it up. And making a memorable character is the only way to make people care about the details of their design. Shape language contributes a lot to this, which is why they're so closely related, but what they're wearing does too. Sometimes you won't realize that the character's big jacket, for example, completely distracts from the recognizability and significance of the shapes of every piece of clothing underneath it until you look at that silhouette alone, because they still stand out when viewed with details included. Without them, the jacket might just make them look like a formless blob, which detracts from their design's effectiveness unless that's your intention. Tip number 5 is to think of your character's design not just as an outfit or an appearance, but as a piece of visual storytelling. A good character design tells you about who the character is and what role they play through visual elements alone. It should reflect their identity in a way that someone without any context or prior knowledge can pick up on. If they're a rebellious delinquent with a Banksy-esque penchant for graffiti, their clothing could be non-conforming and edgy in a way that makes it clear they don't care what anyone thinks of it, and they could be carrying a backpack full of spray paint that you don't need to see the inside of to know that it's full of spray paint because it's got splotches and stains all over it. If they're a doctor who takes their job seriously but is overall a really chill dude who loves music and has a tendency to bend the rules, you could dress him professionally in a proper lab coat and a nice button-up shirt, but leave it partially unbuttoned to show a band t-shirt underneath, and have the sleeves of the lab coat rolled up to show a tame and tasteful but still not altogether professional forearm tattoo. Give a character who loves astronomy a recurring motif of having stars and constellations on their clothing, not projecting. There are so many ways to communicate your character's personality, profession, environment, and passions through their design, and it's important to try to showcase as much of their identity as possible. It's also worth mentioning that it's important to consider the setting they're in when designing them, at least within reason. You don't have to chain yourself to reality, but at least try to maintain believability. That doctor, in reality, wouldn't be allowed to dress like that, but in fiction, we can suspend disbelief so long as he's still dressed reasonably professionally and in a way that we associate with doctors. Having a doctor walking around the hospital in a leather jacket and ripped jeans, guitar slung over his back and hair dyed green and in a mohawk just because you thought it would look cool and reflect his love for music is so far detached from the setting he's in that it seems too out of place to even be vaguely believable. The 6th tip ties closely in with that, and it's to imagine yourself as the character you're designing. You wouldn't make that kind of mistake if you took the time to imagine actually living as that doctor. You'd know that shit would never pass in a real workplace, not functionally or socially. If you put yourself in your character's shoes and take the time to really imagine what it would be like to live as them, go about your day as them, interact with people as them, you gain a better understanding of how they might really dress, what they would carry around with them, and how they would express express themselves within the confines of their daily life and environment. It would influence your design in an incredibly beneficial way. You'd incorporate the fact that they live in a cold place and would have to dress warm, or they'd need a lot of pockets or a bag to carry the tools that they need readily accessible for their job, or that their work or school requires a certain uniform or dress code, or that their environment requires protection or armor, and so on. You as a human being dress the way you do and carry the things you do because your life influences that. Imagining the way your character's life influences how they do makes them so much more believable and authentic. And while we're talking about communicating a character's identity through their design, the 7th tip is to prioritize clarity and recognizability over complexity. Your priority should be making sure that people can, within only a few seconds of looking at them, perceive their design in its entirety and glean something significant about the character based on that perception. I'm not saying detail is bad. Both complex and simplistic designs are capable of accomplishing this. I'm just saying detail shouldn't be the main priority, and if a lot of detail is present, it should be because it contributes to that clarity and recognizability and doesn't obscure it. And on that note, let's talk about tip 8. Don't over-design. Build a basic design that's strong on its own solely because of its most simplistic elements, and then add detail afterwards. This applies to everything, really. We've already discussed form and shape language and the importance of using basic shapes to establish your character's personality before adding detail. But the same principle is pretty universal. Their clothing should send more of a message than their accessories or even the details of that clothing itself, like its patterns or trims or accents. Adding too much detail can actually reduce their design's clarity and recognizability. If that doctor was wearing 3 necklaces and 15 bracelets and his lab coat had 18 band patches stitched on it and a trim of Metallica-esque lightning bolts, and he's got tattoos absolutely everywhere, and he's wearing an AC/DC beanie with 5 band buttons on it, and his hair is 4 different colors, his identity actually becomes less clear because the viewer doesn't even know what part of his design to pay attention to. The defining elements are drowned out. Their color palette should follow this rule too, but I'm making this its own tip number 9, because there's a lot to say about color beyond that too. Obviously, the first is that don't over-design applies to color, and just as significantly as it does to shape too. If your character's color palette is too varied and busy, it becomes way less visually appealing, readable, and memorable. The palette should, ideally, be limited and follow a hierarchy. Give them one primary color that represents the majority of their color scheme, a secondary color that represents the large minority, a few tertiary colors that are much more minimally present, and an accent color that's used very sparingly. I usually like a balance of 50% primary color, 25% secondary color, 10% one tertiary color and 10% another, and 5% of an accent color, but the specifics of that are up to you. The point is to make sure that it's restricted enough that the colors all work together to create a distinctive look without all distracting from one another. They should contribute to each other instead. But like I said, there's more to it than that. It's also important to make sure those colors are cohesive, something you should consult the general concepts of color theory to confirm, and to try to use color to contribute to the communication of your character's identity. Colors are associated with traits just like shapes are, and it would be a missed opportunity not to use them to tell your viewers what traits your character possesses. Color also goes a long way to communicate aspects of their environment and profession. They can be used to show their allegiance to a group associated with a particular color scheme, or reflect the environment that they live in. The point of the tip, I guess, is that color should be used to emphasize a character's identity rather than overwhelm it. Finally, the last tip is to completely ignore all of these rules when you're coming up with your initial concepts. I know, I live to undermine my own points. Seriously though, your characters don't need to meet these standards when you're first developing them. The best advice I have is to completely disregard all of this advice when you're initially brainstorming how you want them to look, because you already have a vision in your head of who they are and how they look, and that vision is more important than anything else. It doesn't matter if that vision doesn't have a recognizable silhouette, doesn't have strong shape language, has too busy of a color palette, or too many details. That is who that character is to you, and your early drafts of their design should be just that. Them. Their essence, so to speak. Those imagined ideas of their design will be the foundation of their final design. They're the most important parts of who they are, and they don't need to look good right away, or follow any character design rules, because that's not their purpose. Their purpose is to give you a starting point that encompasses the most important aspects of them that define them to you. The things that you want to make sure are there in the final design, no matter how many revisions it goes through before it gets there. Hell, make 10 of those designs. Make 20. 20 of those visions for how they might look based solely on your imagined idea of them. Don't let a singular character design rule influence those ideas. Just vomit that shit directly onto your canvas exactly as it is. Apply the rules to them after. Look at those concepts and think, okay, how do I use these guidelines to refine them? How do I develop them to be visually effective and clear and recognizable while still maintaining these key elements that make them them? Because if you apply the rules first, you may very well neglect those elements for fear of them not meeting those standards. And then you would have held yourself back from making the character that you really wanted to make. Make it exist, then make it good. I'm making a whole video about that advice because of how significant and universally applicable it is, and this is just another example of it. But that's just me. This is advice that I've received and learned and found effective, especially over the past couple years of really committing myself to character character design, but it might not work for everyone. And if you're only making OCs for fun, it might not even be particularly important. In that case, what matters most is your own enjoyment. And if your own enjoyment is diminished by an obligation to follow a bunch of rules, ignore them and just have fun. Pick and choose the ones that are actually helpful to you. But hopefully at least some of this will help you create character designs that you feel more confident in if that's a struggle for you, and make the process easier and vaguely less stressful. If you guys have any tips of your own when it comes to creating OCs, I'm sure everyone, myself included, would appreciate it if you'd leave them in the comments. OCs are hugely important to a lot of artists, and I think all of us want more information on how to make their creation easier and more effective. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. Special thank you as always to channel members Joseph Solomon, TC Pratt, Haruki Saluzzo, Peachy, King Good James, Art of Amethyst Fable, Extinction Animation, Indy the Hedgehog, Kai the Memer, Jazz, Just Sayori, Stardust, Hailstorm, and Darkholder, as well as patrons Batman, Kyle Lowe, Jamisha Walker, Kim Yen, Crazy Asar, Gentong, Grayson Xavier, Blah Mage, TC Pratt, Finn, Celine Merriman, Eldritchia, The Stray Dog, Decagon, Jenny Chan, Catbus, Lucy Amajiki, Selena Beebe, Pryday, Totally Shogun, Insomniac Sleep Schedule, Wing Tang Wong, Marie Greer, Potato, Jazz, Boyd Walker, Latte Tabby, Christian Cook, Adam Surovietz, Dariaki, Barius, Hailstorm, Emo Queen Jules, Lord Darkholder, Show, That's It, Craig, Stardust, and The Names Are Gone, and I'll see you in the next one.